What's going on, everyone? Welcome into the Chiefs Zone podcast. My name is Farzin Vasugian. Happy Monday to all of you. It is the first Monday after football season. Yes, we have reached that point now. Boy, it only feels like, 5 months ago, we were all complaining it's taking forever for the NFL season to start, and here we are. It's so weird with the timing of football season now, because it usually ends it used to end late January or early February. Now we're in the second week of February. Next year, it's going to be on Valentine's Day, so plan accordingly. Figure out what you got to figure out for that one. But, there used to be 4 preseason games, and I think the speculation is we will one day get to 18 games, regardless what the NFL is saying. We will get to 18 games, and it'll be 2 preseason games. Well, it used to be 4 preseason games in which everyone played on the same day on a Thursday for the last preseason game. And so it would be exactly 7 days before the opening kickoff game. Now it's 3 preseason games, and there's a very significant gap from the 3rd preseason game to week 1 of the NFL season. It's a pretty significant gap there. So, and then of course the season ends all the way into basically now mid-February. We're getting some seasons. It's still early February, but yeah, nonetheless, we are now in the off season though. So here we are. And there's a lot to talk about if you're the Kansas City Chiefs, especially after seeing some of the teams in this postseason. And obviously, we're now getting more and more into the NFL draft and just kind of looking at what's next for Kansas City. What can be learned from these playoff games? I think Seattle really put on paper and on film what every team strives to be. And if you're Kansas City, there's a lot to figure out when you look at what Seattle accomplished in this game. And we discussed some of that on last night's podcast. Feel free to check that out after this podcast, of course, if you haven't done so already. We're not going to recap the entire Super Bowl. There are a couple of things from the Super Bowl I want to mention and connecting it to Kansas City, and what should the Chiefs try to acquire from Seattle's methods and apply it to their team. And if they want to do that, what must they do this offseason to accomplish that? Those things are important. So we'll discuss that on this podcast. And also, that'll transition to, will the Chiefs be in the Super Bowl next year? Look, there have been a lot of reactions from everybody about the New England Patriots over the last 24 hours. And what kind of a football team are they? And look, Kansas City kind of had these similar conversations where, they had all these close games last year and then they get blown out. Sure enough, the Chiefs only won 6 games this year, so they missed the playoffs by a big margin. But there's still the thought that the Chiefs are going to be back in it. Like, sure, they're down, but they're not going to be down for very long at all. That's at least the expectation. And I think in Kansas City, you're hoping that is going to be a realistic expectation that comes to fruition. But will the Chiefs be back in the Super Bowl? And who are the serious contenders in the AFC? Now, look, there's a lot to occur this offseason. We've yet to see. Free agency has yet to even start. Obviously, the draft, maybe a surprise trade here and there. How wide open is the AFC? Because a lot of people thought New England was on the rise. Some people still think New England is going to be a good football team. A lot of people think that the Patriots are going to go back to what they were the last 2 years, being a 4-win team each of the last 2 years. What kind of a football team will New England be? Will they be in Kansas City's way of making it to Super Bowl 61? Plus, Chiefs Hall of Famer and our good friend Duron Cherry will join me on this podcast for a few minutes. Duron, as you guys know, has had a crazy 24 hours. He, of course, got the name drop in the Super Bowl commercial, the Uber Eats commercial, with Matthew McConaughey mentioning him, mentioning all the foods and players whose names are after a food. So we're going to talk to Duron Cherry about that, just kind of get his reaction. And did he have any idea that was going to occur? I'll ask him about that. So Duron will join me, and we'll discuss that shortly. Before we go any further, I want to let you know this podcast is brought to you by SeatGeek. That's where I go to for all of my sports ticketing needs. Of course, the NFL season is now complete, but we still have the NBA. We have the NHL. Major League Baseball is starting up real soon. College basketball, big game tonight at Fog Allen. And if you guys want to catch any of the action in person, all you have to do is go to SeatGeek. And if you're a new SeatGeek customer, use my promo code Farzine. That'll save you $20 off your first purchase from SeatGeek. Go to SeatGeek.com, pick your tickets at checkout. New customers, don't forget, enter my promo code Farzine. That'll save you $20 off your first order from SeatGeek. All right. Let's get right into it. Let's quickly, we recap Super Bowl 60. Let's do a Cliff Notes version of it, and more so from the Seattle side of things. We'll talk about New England much later in the podcast, because what happens to New England is very significant, especially if you're Kansas City, a team that is expecting to bounce back and contend next year. Look, Sam Darnold did not have a great game. Yeah, he played a good game. And because of how low scoring of a game it was just 4 field goals from the Seahawks. New England was just waiting for Sam Darnold to make a mistake. And I think Sam Darnold played a very Alex Smith type of football game where you don't have flashy plays, you don't make the big plays, but you do enough to help your team survive. You play it safe. And that's what Sam Darnold did. And as you should against a very good defense like New England. Again, I know there's a lot people are making out about New England, but I'm telling you now, New England's defense is for real. They have been. Everyone talked about Drake May this year because he was an MVP candidate, and rightfully so, but that defense doesn't get enough credit. So because Sam Darnold didn't have the biggest game, Jackson Smith-Njigba was fairly quiet in this one. Cooper Kupp, who, not the receiver he once was, the former Super Bowl MVP with the Rams, he was the best pass catcher in this one, 6 catches for 61 yards. In fact, he had the most receptions of any pass catcher in this Super Bowl. But it was their running game, and I see a lot of you guys talking about that in the comments right now. Kenneth Walker running the ball 27 times and collecting 135 yards against New England's defense. And listen, he had a couple of times where he was stopped behind the line of scrimmage, but still found a way to amass 135 yards in this game. That is by far his best game of the season. In the regular season, Kenneth Walker only had 2 games where he rushed for more than 100 yards. Week 2 against the Steelers, and then in week 16 against the Rams, that crazy epic overtime game on Thursday night against the Rams. So those were his only 2 100-yard games in the regular season. He had a 100-yard game against the 49ers in the wild card round, in the divisional round, rushing for 116, 3 touchdowns in that one. That's the most he's had in a single game this year. Just seems like he saved his best moments for the playoffs. And then, of course, 135 yards rushing, the most in all of this season, regular and postseason, for Kenneth Walker. So listen, I know Kenneth Walker, his name just became a hotter commodity, hotter than it was before, for teams to look at. And we know Seattle spent some money last offseason bringing in guys like Cooper Kupp and Sam Darnold. Would they be able to keep Kenneth Walker? We'll see. I'd be surprised if he were to leave. I'd be surprised if Seattle let him walk. But when you look at what Seattle did, they provided that balance for Sam Darnold. The passing game just was not there. New England's defense, they played great. They didn't let the Seahawks light it up on the field like they had against the Rams, the 49ers this postseason. The Seahawks were kept in check in this game from a passing perspective. So they forced them to run the ball. Unfortunately for New England, they just weren't ready for Kenneth Walker to have as big of a game as he did, doing so 27 times on the ground. And listen, I always make a big deal of time of possession. And if you look at time of possession in this game, Seattle won at 33 minutes and 11 seconds to New England's 26 minutes and 49 seconds. That's not awful. If you're a team that only had the ball for 26 minutes, you have a good chance to still win a football game. And I think sometimes that can be misleading. If you have 2 long drives and they both they lead to turnovers, especially if they were defensive scores, that can certainly be a little misleading. But when you run the ball really well, like Seattle did with Kenneth Walker last night, you'll win the time of possession battle. And I think if you're Kansas City, you've got to figure out how can you win time of possession, because on next year's schedule, the Chiefs are going to be facing a lot of good teams. They're facing the Bengals, who have Joe Burrow and that high-flying offense. You're going to be facing Justin Herbert. And listen, I know a lot of people have their opinions about Justin Herbert. I know there's already outrage because the Chargers are favored to win the AFC West by some people out there. And I think people forget, yes, say what you want about the Chargers, but if Justin Herbert does have a good offensive line, he's hard to stop, man. He really is. This Chargers team, I think their first 3 games this year were all divisional opponents, and they won all of them. And they looked great doing so. If they can have a healthy offensive line, that's a team that has serious potential. And I think you could say the same about Kansas City. We'll see what happens with Kansas City in the offseason. But you're going to be playing Herbert. You're going to be playing against Josh Allen and the Bills. You're going to be facing the 2 teams that played in the NFC Championship game, the quarterbacks, Matthew Stafford and Sam Darnold. I believe Matthew Stafford's expected to be back. Now, I just told you the away teams. Obviously, I mentioned Herbert in that one. You'll play the Chargers at home and away. We'll see what the international schedule, what comes up there. But I just told you the away teams, excluding the AFC West. You got Bengals, Bills, Dolphins, Falcons, Rams, and Seahawks. Of the non-AFC West teams, the quarterbacks you'll be facing: Joe Burrow, Josh Allen, Sam Darnold, and Matthew Stafford, which I think is expected for the Rams. At home, the home schedule does not look as bad. Outside the AFC West, you've got the Arizona Cardinals. They don't pose as a big threat to anybody. You've got the Indianapolis Colts. They had a really good season, but you certainly saw them start to struggle when they started facing better competition. And you saw the Chiefs keep Daniel Jones and that Colts offense in check in the fourth quarter and in overtime. You have the Jets. Don't need to get into that. You've got the 49ers. The 2 toughest opponents outside your division, the 49ers and the Patriots at home. Now, we'll get into New England later, because I know there are all kinds of opinions about New England right now. The 49ers, look, I know Purdy is maybe not viewed as a top 5, maybe not even a top 10 quarterback by a lot of people out there. But that 49ers team, they had their injuries last year. They've always been competitive more times than not. But you don't really have that daunting of a schedule, at home at least. On the road, this is going to be a very tough road stand for Kansas City. It will be. And if you're the Chiefs, you've got to find a way to have a balance with this football team on the offensive side of the football. And I think in the long run, that'll also create balance for both sides of the ball. Listen, here's my thing. And I was having a conversation with someone about this morning. When you look at the Chiefs, they don't have a lot of room with the salary cap. It's not going to be difficult to get under the salary cap, but once they do have enough room by the time the new league year begins, how much will they have to work with? Because they're going to try to re-sign some guys, and once you do that, how much cap space will you have left? Because you got to keep cap space for the regular season as well. When injuries occur and you promote guys from the practice squad, you sign new guys to the practice squad, you've got to have enough cap space for all of that as well. Keep that in mind. So when Kansas City's trying to figure out who their running back is going to be, because right now we don't know. Pacheco and Hunt are both free agents. And off the top of my head, and I'll look this up right now, but I think the only returning running backs, Rashard Smith is the only guy under contract. So the Chiefs have Isaiah Pacheco, Kareem Hunt, Damian Pierce, and Keontae Ingram. No disrespect to Keontae Ingram, but I don't think we've ever seen him take a regular season snap before. I think he's been on the team on their practice squad for a couple of years now. Those are your 5 running backs, Brashard Smith included, and 4 of them are set to be free agents. So if you're Kansas City, what do you do with the running back position? Who do you bring back? Now, I mentioned last night, because of the cap space and because of Eric Bieniemy's familiarity with Pacheco and Hunt, is there a possibility we see Pacheco and Hunt come back for one more year? And listen, I'm not saying that's what I want. And I acknowledge this is not at all the most thrilling of suggestions that anyone could suggest. But I think we have to be open to that being a possibility. Again, we don't have to like it, but I think that's more realistic than I think most would recognize. Yeah, I know it was 5 field goals, but I'm just talking the first 3 quarters. David says, fire Reed, bring in young and fresh ideas. I mean, look, I know the Chiefs just had a bad season, but you really want to fire the guy that just guided you to the last 3 Super Bowls? Come on. If it happens back-to-back years, sure, I can get on board with that. But one bad season, no. I think Andy Reid's reserved the right to have an opportunity to fix this ship and turn it around after one bad season. 2 bad seasons, then let's have that conversation. Did you see the Boomer Esiason podcast? He said Sam Darnold had to pay $75K to play the Super Bowl because of California's jock tax. Did not know that, but I guess that doesn't surprise me a whole lot. Michael says, cover all bases. If we do, it's got to be worth it. The lack of picks suck. So here's the one thing I will say about that. Yes, you right now have, and I have this in front of me, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 draft picks. Now, I believe the Chiefs are going to get a couple of compensatory picks. I think Justin Reed and Treshaun Wharton will translate into compensatory picks. So you'll go from 6 to 8. Now, I'll get into the draft later on. For now, I want to focus on the offense. Let me ask you guys this question here. What do you think is the biggest need on the offensive side of the football? Let me say this. The 3 biggest needs for the Chiefs on offense only. I mean, you got your quarterback. He may miss 1 or 2 games at the most. At the most. Running back, I think we can all agree that needs a massive upgrade. The tight end position, Kelsey is expected to return. We discussed that last night with some of the reports that were coming out of Super Bowl Media Week. Backup tight end, listen, I know Noah Gray played really well as a backup a couple of years ago, had a very quiet season last year. Is backup tight end something the Kansas City Chiefs are seriously considering? Now, let's look at the offensive line. You have your left tackle in Josh Simmons. Yes, he missed some time for personal reasons and had that wrist injury. 2 years in a row where he's ended the season due to injury. Happened this past year with the wrist injury, colliding with Kareem Hunt on a block, and then the year before with his knee injury as a member of the Ohio State Buckeyes. Now, the good news about Josh Simmons is he came back and was far more prepared for 2025 faster than I think a lot of people anticipated. People thought he was going to miss the start of training camp, and that was not the case. He looked great in training camp, looked great when he was on the field. Yes, had a little bit of a rookie learning curve, but then he had to step away for a personal matter for 4 games. Then he suffered the injury shortly after that. When Simmons is on the field, he's good and very reliable. The left tackle that I think Kansas City has been begging for several years now. Center and right guard, Creed Humphrey, Trey Smith, we don't even need to discuss those guys. Your left guard, Kingsley Suamataia. I thought Kingsley Suamataia was a far better left guard than he was a left tackle, but I'm not going to say this guy was a top 10 left guard. I think he's shown flashes that he can be a top 10 left guard. He's certainly got some work to do there. Now, what's going to happen at right tackle? We know Jawan Taylor's not coming back. It would be shocking if he did. Because, first of all, this guy committed 55 penalties in 3 years. That's not ideal at all. And on top of that, he's taking way too much money from the Chiefs right now. Cutting him saves you far more money than it would hurt you with the dead cap. So you know he's getting cut. Is Jalen Moore the prepared right tackle for Kansas City? Or is Esapoli going to compete for that job? Or is Kansas City going to look for someone in free agency or the draft? Now, I think, again, I know there are not a lot of draft picks right now, and I think they can find a way to get at least 4. Do you look for depth on the offensive line? I think every year you have to consider an offensive line, at least 1 or 2 in the draft. They got a couple last year or 2 years ago when getting Hunter Norzad, who I thought was a good left guard, or left guard in that last game against the Raiders. Albeit, a lot of backups played in that one. But I thought he also looked good the year before as a center. Not necessarily with his snaps, but more so just with his pass blocking. So that's 2 years in a row. A backup like Hunter Norzad looked really good filling in. And then CJ Hansen, who's been around for a little bit. Kansas City might consider drafting an offensive lineman for depth in later rounds. So just to see what a lot of you guys are saying, and again, just to be clear, I just want to know your top 3 needs on the offensive side of the football. We'll get to the defense. Everyone is saying running back. People are also mentioning tight end as well. Some are saying offensive line, specifically tackle. I'm just reading what you guys are saying. Bob says Hunt and Pacheco say goodbye. I don't know if I would go there. Not because I want Hunt and Pacheco both back. Hunt, I'd really like. Remember several years back, the Chiefs had Jamal Charles and Thomas Jones as a nice 1-2 punch. I think Kareem Hunt can kind of be that Thomas Jones type of football player where he's really reliable for short yardage situations. Because Kareem Hunt has a lot of value there. And I know Kareem Hunt, nobody was calling for his services in 2024 when he was available and the Chiefs signed him because of all the injuries that were happening. But I think now, even in his 30s, Kareem Hunt's proved that, no, he's not what he once was as a rookie or in his second season before he got cut. However, Hunt still has some value and has some stuff left in the tank to offer any offense. So I think Hunt's services will be requested by some teams in free agency. But Pacheco, listen, Eric Bieniemy has coached Pacheco. It was his rookie season. Does Bieniemy think it would be worth it for the Chiefs to bring back Pacheco? It's ultimately not his decision. He's just the offensive coordinator, but he's going to have some input. I know Andy Reid always wants to hear from what his coordinators have to say. Because, again, keep in mind, I think the realistic reason why Pacheco and Hunt could be back is because, number one, Bieniemy's familiar with both of them. Number two, the Chiefs, again, I just tell you guys this now, they don't have a lot of space with the cap room. They'll create cap space, but once you start re-signing Travis Kelce, maybe Leo Chenal and Tyquan Thornton, you're not going to be able to do much in free agent. You're not going to have a big free agent splash. And that might require you to bring back both Pacheco and Hunt. Now, I think as far as the running back position goes, let's look at the number 9 pick. If Jeremiah Love somehow is available to the Chiefs at 9, boy, that'd be a really hard pass. It'd be difficult to say no to Jeremiah Love if he's there at 9. Listen, I know the 3 biggest names for me, and I think for a lot of Chiefs fans, David Bailey, Reuben Bain Jr., the 2 edge rushers, one from Ohio State, the other from I'm sorry, I said Ohio State. I meant Miami. and David Bailey from Texas Tech. And of course, Jeremiah Love from Notre Dame. Hypothetically speaking, some way, somehow, if all three are available, who does Kansas City pick? I've been on the Reuben Bain Jr. train since the offseason started for the Chiefs. But it is really hard to say no to Jeremiah Love. And I think that's even more of a case now because Eric Bieniemy is the offensive coordinator. Running backs have done really well under Bieniemy in Kansas City, whether Bieniemy was a running backs coach or the offensive coordinator. You can't just completely ignore Love at 9 if he's there. I know a lot of people get scared of the idea of taking a running back at 9. Look, just because Clyde Edwards-Helaire did not pan out does not mean every other running back is going to look exactly the same. Now, I see a lot of you guys are talking about defense, and I think this is now the part where we transition to the defensive side of the football. Yes, there are needs on the offensive side, but I don't think it's as bad as it looks on the defensive side. I do have concerns about Kansas City's defense for the upcoming season. The Chiefs' sack number has gone down the last 3 years. And when you look at who the Chiefs have for free agency, guys that they need to try to bring back, yeah, there are a lot of wide receivers. Hollywood Brown, Tyquan Thornton, Juju Smith-Schuster, Nico Remigio. There are a lot of guys to account for. You only have 3 wide receivers under contract, and they're all on rookie deals right now. Those are all guys you drafted. We'll see with Rashee Rice. Is he going to suffer any consequences? Is he going to face a suspension? Is he going to get a new contract? I don't think he's really in position to demand a new contract, but neither here nor there. I don't want to make that a discussion for this podcast. On the defensive side, boy, you got a lot of guys to account for. On the defensive line alone, you've got Derek Nutty, Charles Omenihu, Mike Pennell, Jerry Tillery. A lot of defensive tackles who are going to be available. Janarius Robinson, who the Chiefs acquired in a trade with the Raiders. And I believe that was when Chris Jones was holding out, if I remember that correctly. Maybe I have him confused for a different Raiders player that came over. I can't recall, but he used to play for the Raiders at one point. Now, the linebackers, Jack Cochran, who's been part of your special teams unit, didn't really have a good season on special teams. He's a free agent. Leo Chenal, probably your best defensive player, maybe your most underrated player for this entire free agent class from Kansas City. He's a free agent. I would even argue maybe the most underrated free agent that could hit the market. Another underrated guy, as we move to the secondary, Brian Cook. Not the flashiest safety. He's not Eric Berry, Tyrann Mathieu, Justin Reed, but he does a lot of really good things that don't come up on the stat sheet. Same with Jalen Watson. As far as depth goes, guys who've been on the team for a while, Josh Williams, Deion Bush, all those guys I mentioned in the secondary are all from the same draft class. Deion Bush, not from the same draft class, but he joined all of those other defensive backs the same year. Mike Edwards, who was pretty good for depth purposes a couple of years ago, wasn't used as much this past season. You got a lot of guys to account for. You love to have Brian Cook back, Jalen Watson, Leo Chenal. I think Mike Pennell would be good for depth purposes. And if Omar Norman-Lott can stay healthy, I think that's great news for your defensive line. On the offensive side, they're going to get Travis Kelce back, it sounds like. Kareem Hunt would, I think, be nice to have back. And Tyquan Thornton, I mean, you would be crazy to let this guy get away from you. I'd like to see Hollywood Brown get one more chance with a much better coaching staff already in place. Now, let me say this, because I told you guys for Justin Reed and Tershawn Wharton, who the Chiefs lost in free agency last offseason, I think you'll get compensatory picks for those two players. Here's the big topic of this podcast tonight. Trent McDuffie. I want to know from you guys, what should the Chiefs do with Trent McDuffie? Because he's going to ask for a big contract. And no, he doesn't get a lot of interceptions, but he does a lot of other things right on the field in a big manner. Now, this past season was not necessarily his best, and I know that Cowboys game is the one game a lot of people point to in terms of his struggles that he had this season. But if you look at Sauce Gardner, he signed a 4-year deal averaging $30.1 million per year. Derek Stingley Jr. also signed a 4-year deal, slightly a little less than that, $30 million a year. J.C. Horn has a contract of 4 years, $25 million. Jalen Ramsey, $24.1 million in 3 years. Pat Surtain II, $24 million per year in a 4-year deal. Now, again, the biggest one I read to you was Sauce Gardner. He signed that with the Jets, but got traded to the Colts, and the Colts gave up 2 first-round draft picks to get him. I'm not here to suggest that you're going to get 2 first-round draft picks for Trent McDuffie. You're not. You're just not. The reason the Colts made that move is because they were making a very serious push to try to go to the Super Bowl. Unfortunately, they dealt with injuries. The schedule got more difficult, but that's a whole nother discussion here. Yeah, see, Brad is saying the Chiefs can't afford him under the cap situation, and I 100% agree. Look, the Chiefs have tried really, really hard to retain as many guys possible. Hey, let's say they've drafted well. Maybe not as well recently compared to years before, but they have drafted a lot of really good football players and have tried really hard to keep it. They kept really all the guys from the 2021 draft class that are necessary to keep. Creed Humphrey, Trey Smith, Noah Gray, Nick Bolton. I know people might not be too fond of the Nick Bolton contract right now, but the Chiefs have tried to keep as many guys possible. They gave Chris Jones that big contract last offseason as well. Or not last offseason, excuse me, the offseason before that. And then from the 2022 draft class, they gave George Karlaftis a big contract. That portion of his contract has yet to kick in, because one thing to keep in mind with Karlaftis, he's going to play under the 5th-year option. So that actual 4-year extension does not start until next year. So the contract that Karlaftis signed right before training camp, that did not take effect last year. It doesn't even take effect for this year. That starts next year. And I know Karlaftis had kind of an underwhelming season. Yeah, he got a lot of pressures, but we're kind of getting to the point now where if you're getting pressures, and if those pressures are not turning into ill-advised throws, then what's the point of a pressure to begin with? And that's where we are right now with Kansas City's defensive line. I know the Chiefs really like Ashton Gelati, who won the team's Rookie of the Year award. And I know the options weren't great because Omar Norman-Lott got hurt. Josh Simmons missed a lot of games. So they ended up giving it to Ashton Gelati. If you guys saw me, my vote for team MVP and rookie, best rookie was Creed Humphrey and Josh Simmons. That's who I gave it to. But obviously the Chiefs players who voted on this, they felt otherwise. Look, I don't want to see Trent McDuffie play for another team. Just like how I didn't want to see Tyreek Hill get traded, or L'Jarius Sneed, or Joe Thuney. But you have to make very difficult decisions because you've tried so damn hard to keep so many guys. It's gotten you to a point where you truly cannot keep guys. Listen, you had guys like Josh Williams and Jalen Watson go on social media right before the regular season finale against the Raiders. They were out there putting out basically a goodbye post saying, if this is my last time, thank you for everything. I remember Willie Gay during the 2023 postseason run to Super Bowl 58. He didn't necessarily have a goodbye post, but once the Chiefs beat the Dolphins, and I can't remember what the other game was, there was another game that Kansas City needed to go in their favor to have a shot to host the AFC Championship game, and it didn't happen. And Willie Gay basically tweeted, he said, yeah, this is probably my last Chiefs game at Arrowhead. So players, I mean, listen, players, their agents, and the general manager of the teams, they have conversations. They try to keep things behind closed doors, but you just can't always have it that way. So players make it very clear. They think they know what's going to happen. I think with Trent McDuffie, I think he may have played his last game with the Chiefs, because realistically, there is absolutely no way in hell the Chiefs can keep McDuffie for what he's asking for. I can't remember if it was a Facebook comment or a tweet. Somebody sent something to me and said, we should only re-sign players who are willing to take a team-friendly discount. Folks, if you want to make a run to it, first of all, if you want to get back to the playoffs and have a legitimate shot at reaching Super Bowl 61, you're going to have to pay guys. You want good football players, you got to pay up. And I get it. You know, Patrick Mahomes is no longer on a rookie deal. He's got a hefty contract. So it's not easy to sign guys. Like, teams right now, like the Patriots, they've got Drake May on a rookie deal. This is the best time for the Patriots to spend money. Any team that has a rookie QB that's been doing well for them, this is the best opportunity to go and spend money out there. Because once you have to sign a quarterback to an extension, if you want to keep him, the quarterback is obviously going to say, hey, you see value in me. And his agent's going to say, okay, pay him a lot of money. And look, we know damn well you don't have to do much to become the highest paid quarterback in the NFL. Okay. We look at the quarterbacks that have become either the highest paid or top 5 paid. I mean, Dak Prescott became the highest paid for a minute. It's not that difficult nowadays in the NFL. The Chiefs cap space right now stands at $54.9 million over the cap. Let's just go with $55 million, just to keep it a round number. We know what needs to be done. Jawan Taylor, Mike Dana, possibly Drew Tranquill, and trading Trent McDuffie will help a lot. Because I'm looking at the $55 million in the red. That ain't gonna work for a Trent McDuffie extension. Look, I don't know what Kelsey's gonna ask for, because we know he's about to marry a multi-billionaire, and he's made a lot of money off the field as well. Is he going to play from the goodness of his heart? I doubt that. He's gonna still want something. Players are never gonna play for a charitable cause. Now, they might be willing to take somewhat of a discount to be able to play with Patrick Mahomes and a chance to win a championship, but they're still going to want something. I'm looking at the 2027 cap, which is not relevant right now. It's right now $89 million under the cap. And that is considering Mahomes has a big cap number of $74 million, which is about to get restructured. We'll see how specifically. I think the big speculation, and it's been this way for a couple of years now, that Mahomes will just sign a new extension so they can help reduce that number. But how many times are they going to keep doing this with Mahomes? Because again, all that does is kick the can down the road. J-Man on Instagram says, trade him. We need turnovers, not just solid coverage. Listen, if you're not getting, takeaways are important. I don't disagree with you. But if you can play well in coverage, that helps. I mean, listen, the Chiefs have not been the best when it comes to takeaways these last 3 years, but they've been a top 10 defense 3 years in a row, both total defense and in points allowed. Now, it is gradually declining, gradually. And I do worry about that this upcoming season with how many guys they have in free agency and who they're going to prioritize and who they end up bringing back, who they let walk, all of that stuff. Here's what I will say. Because we know Kansas City's offense was not very consistent. They were a disaster in many games, in fact. If Kansas City's offense can play better, and I think they will, just with Bieniemy and O'Shea part of the coaching staff alone, but there's still room to improve with the personnel. And we'll see what they do there. I think that's going to help the defense, because the Chiefs offense won't have so many 3-and-outs. They're not going to force the defense to have to come play more minutes than they should. That's never going to help any defense. And I think that'll really translate to more wins in the long run for next season. What I will say is, on the defensive side, yes, you have a lot of guys that are expected to be free agents, and Trent McDuffie might not be back this year because of what he might be demanding. Here's what I will say. with that number 9 pick, if Ruben Bain Jr. is available, you got to take him. If Ruben Bain Jr. or David Bailey, if they're available, I think you have to take them over Jeremiah Love. I think Jeremiah Love would be a more exciting addition, and that's going to help Patrick Mahomes because he's coming off a torn ACL injury, and not only just an ACL injury, it's late in the season, so he'll need some of that help from the offensive backfield. Now, if you don't get a running back with the 9th pick, and if you can get a first-round pick for Trent McDuffie, is there a possibility you get a running back later in the first round? Do you get a running back in the second round? Because the Chiefs are going to be picking early in all of these rounds. Now, I think they're going to rotate with Cincinnati and New Orleans because they all have the same record from last year. So they're going to rotate how that all works in every round. That's how it was explained to me. But if you're the Chiefs, you got to get either Ruben Bain Jr. or David Bailey. Now, something Nick Wright brought up on his show today, First Things First on Fox Sports 1, and this is very interesting. They were talking about Will Campbell, who had a really bad Super Bowl. He allowed 14 pressures, I think I read from somewhere. And this, going back to the Super Bowl, in terms of what the Seahawks put out on display for how teams really want to be, Seattle's pass rush was great, whether they were blitzing or just going with the 4-man rush. And the Chiefs have struggled immensely with the 4-man rush in recent years. And I think drafting Omar Norman-Lott from Tennessee last year, that's a big step in the right direction. Unfortunately, Omar Norman-Lott dealt with multiple injuries last year that prevented him from being able to showcase his full potential. Because when he was on the field, Omar Norman-Lott did some good things for Kansas City's defense, but we didn't see much of it. Ashton Gelati, I know the Chiefs like him in what he showed on the field last year. But if you get Ruben Bain Jr., I think that's going to help your defense so much, man. Your 4-man pass rush is about to see a big improvement. It's going to move into the right direction. And I think you're going to see a lot of pressures and sacks with a 4-man rush. And listen, we know what Spags loves to do with Nick Bolton, with Leo Chenal, with Trent McDuffie, Najee Johnson. Now, a lot of those guys I mentioned, Drew Tranquil as well, how many of those guys are going to be back? We have no idea. But I think at the end of the day, and I think that's a big reason why this might be a heavy defensive back draft for the Chiefs. Maybe not in the first round, but I think in later rounds, you'll see the Chiefs target a lot of defensive backs, kind of like what they did in 2022 with McDuffie, Watson, Williams, Johnson, Cook. I mean, you drafted a lot of defensive backs. I know there was another defensive back they drafted. I don't think he's stuck around too long, or maybe I'm thinking of a different draft class. But the Chiefs got, as far as I can remember, 5 defensive backs from the 2022 draft class. And they did pretty damn well. At the time, I expressed my concern. That's way too many young guys in your secondary. But they proved to be very good for the Chiefs. Here's my thing. If you have a great defensive front, if you got good edge rushers, that's going to work itself out with the rest of the defense. You've got Nick Bolton back. I know Nick Bolton's not a good cover linebacker. I don't think anyone's going to argue otherwise. But Nick Bolton does a lot of really good things against the run. And whenever they send him to blitz, good things happen with Nick Bolton when he does that. It helps out the defensive line a lot. If Omar Norman-Lott can stay healthy, being alongside Chris Jones is not going to get double teamed often. You just can't do that. And I think Ruben Bain Jr., if he's a part of this defense, he's going to do a lot of good things. Now, something Nick Wright mentioned, and I know I was teasing that, something he mentioned about Will Campbell. Next Gen Stats, a few hours before kickoff last night, put out a stat that he had allowed 8.5 of his 11.5 sacks to edge rushers with bigger arm length. And I know, listen, there's a reason why at the combine, why they do all these measurements. If you're Kansas City, how much are you looking at arm length? That's important. And I think one knock on Ruben Bain Jr. is that he doesn't have the best arm length. It's 30.75 inches. I think the ideal arm length for any edge rusher would be maybe 33 to 35. But the knock on Ruben Bain Jr. is the arm length. When you just look at him, I mean, the guy looks like a physical specimen. He's ready to run over any offensive tackle in his way. And if you watch a national championship game against Indiana, I'm struggling to remember his name. The guy who does Thursday Night Football with Al Michaels. Kirk. Yeah, he has his dog, Peter. Kirk Herbstreit. Kirk Herbstreit mentioned how much the offensive tackles were struggling in that game because of Ruben Bain Jr. I think if you're a Chiefs fan, a big reason why you watch that national championship game is to see what Ruben Bain Jr. is all about. I know in that first playoff game that Miami had, Ruben Bain Jr. didn't necessarily look convincing to a lot of people. But in that national championship game, he was a big part of Miami's success. I mean, they had a chance to win. And Ruben Bain Jr. probably could have won defensive MVP for that game. I would rather see us get our franchise running back and trade Trent McDuffie for a draft pick. Maybe we get us an edge rusher. If you're saying a franchise running back, you mean through the draft? It's going to be hard to do in free agency. Listen, I like Breece Hall. I like Kenneth Walker. You ain't getting them in Kansas City. As much as I hate to say it, those guys are going to be demanding a lot of money, and I don't know if Brett Veach will even be willing to spend that type of money. I would bet hell no on that. I just don't see that happening. So if you want that running back long term, Jeremiah Love is a great consideration because, number one, he is going to be on a rookie deal. He's young, obviously, and he'll be around for at least 4 years for a cheap price. That's one solution to the running back problem that Kansas City has. Joshua says, I don't care about arm length. You draft a guy like that. Listen, there's a reason why they do these measurements. And I'm not saying that I care. I do care to an extent. If a guy can play, a guy can play. Now, that doesn't mean every successful college player translates to the NFL and has a successful NFL career. There are a lot of great quarterbacks who were Heisman candidates, did not end up doing much in the NFL. I mean, Chase Daniel was a great college football player, but he was a career backup in the NFL. Now, let me just say this, because Ruben Bain Jr., Jeremiah Love, if somehow, and I know I'm playing fantasy football here, if you somehow got those guys in Kansas City, that'd be significant. Let me ask you guys this question. Here's a trade proposal from me. If you're going to trade Trent McDuffie, you got to trade him to a team that seriously needs help on defense. You know who needs help on defense? The Cincinnati Bengals. A team that, yeah, you've been conference rivals with for quite some time. And I think the expectation is that both the Chiefs and the Bengals are going to bounce back in 2026. Now, I've been very firm in saying that for Trent McDuffie, you can get a couple of draft picks. You can either get a 1 and a 4 or a 2 and a 3. If you get a 2 and a 3, you should be able to demand at least a 7 or a 6, somewhere in there. But I think you can get multiple draft picks for Trent McDuffie. I know the Rams are kind of a popular name because they need help on defense, and they've got multiple first-round picks. But what if you gave Trent McDuffie to the Bengals for the number 10 pick? Nothing else. All you're getting back for Trent McDuffie from Cincinnati is the number 10 pick. You'd be trading McDuffie to an AFC conference rival and a team that could bounce back and have a much better season. I think a lot of people would bet the Bengals would be better in 2026 compared to 2025. So there is that risk of sending McDuffie to a conference rival. Now, that hasn't shied the Chiefs away before. They traded Tyreek Hill to the Dolphins. The Dolphins have had a couple of really good regular seasons with Tyreek Hill, but that didn't lead to anything else after that. They traded L'Jarius Sneed to Tennessee. Tennessee had a chance to maybe go in the right direction, and maybe they will with Cam Ward. But the Chiefs sure as hell were not scared to make that move. They traded Tyreek Hill and L'Jarius Sneed to AFC teams. So here's my question. Would you trade Trent McDuffie for the number 10 pick in the draft? Just my question here. Would you accept it if you're Kansas City? And do you think Cincinnati would accept it? It'd be really hard to give away the number 10. I shouldn't say give away, but trade away the number 10 pick. But if you're getting a player like Trent McDuffie, and let's be honest, Cincinnati needs serious help on defense. I mean, they absolutely need help on that side of the football. If you can do that, I think that's a win for both sides. I really do. Now, I don't want to see Trent McDuffie ever put on the yucky orange Bengals jersey. Let's be honest. They don't like him, and we don't like them. They don't like us. But I think that would benefit Kansas City. If you can find a way to pick in the top 10 in back-to-back selections, oh, that is huge for Kansas City. That is monumental for the Chiefs. Does Cincinnati have the salary cap for him? I think they do. Yeah, they've been spending a lot of money lately. They've got $54 million in cap room. So yes, they have room. Next year they have $151 million. And the year after that, $207 million. Obviously, you'll sign guys to 2-3 year deals, so that number will change, those numbers in future seasons. But the big part of their salary cap is Joe Burrow, T. Higgins, and Jamar Chase. It doesn't seem like, could they cut Orlando Brown and get over with him? Because that would be beneficial for them. Let me just see something. What if they cut Orlando Brown? Yeah, they'll get about $14 million in cap room if they cut Orlando Brown. I'd be shocked if they didn't cut Orlando Brown, because he's been a liability more than anything else. Rams have more number 1 picks than the Bengals. Yes, I get that. But when do the Rams pick? Let me just look at that real quickly, because it won't be, they got the number 13 pick. It's not bad, but I don't think the Rams are giving up the 13th pick for Trent McDuffie. They're not. The other first round pick they have the 29th pick. They're willing to give that up for McDuffie. In addition, I think they'll also be willing to give up a couple more draft picks in later rounds. If all he got was a 1 and a 3 for Trent McDuffie, I think Kansas City would make that move. And I think they'd probably target a defensive back with the 29th pick if they do trade with the Rams. So there's a lot for Kansas City to consider. I think the Rams or the Bengals are the two serious candidates for Trent McDuffie to go to. Those are two teams, both have great offenses, but they need serious help on the defensive side of the football. Listen, if you're gonna trade with Cincinnati and all they're gonna give you is a number 10 pick, I'll take that. I don't have an issue with that at all. Yes, more draft capital would be nice, but I think you've just got to understand, some guys aren't willing to give up a whole lot. And giving up the number 10 pick for McDuffie is a lot. So I think that's something that if you're the Chiefs, you've got to consider. Now, this leads me to my next question. Will the Chiefs be back in the Super Bowl? Let's talk about the teams in the AFC, because New England is the AFC team that played in the Super Bowl this year, and they looked awful. They did not look like they were ready for the big stage. Now let's look at the AFC. And the AFC West, you have the Broncos and the Chargers who made the playoffs. And even though the Chiefs missed the playoffs, I don't think anyone is writing off the Chiefs anytime soon. I think if you're looking at the Chiefs, you still look at them as that team. So even after a 6-11 season, the Chiefs are still viewed as that team. And I think a lot of people expect them to bounce back, especially if Mahomes is ready for week 1. AFC South, Jacksonville. I think that team is just getting started under Liam Cohen. I think Trevor Lawrence had his best year so far in the NFL. Houston can be a serious threat if CJ Stroud plays better. Indianapolis, they had a really good season last year up until mid to late November. Daniel Jones, I mean, what does the future hold for him? We don't really know right now. Seems like he kind of resurrected his career the same way Sam Darnold did, but he had that injury. So we don't really know. Is Tennessee going to move in the right direction with Robert Saleh? Can he get the best out of Cam Ward? The AFC South, I think, is more interesting than a lot of people would realize. The AFC North is also intriguing. Aaron Rodgers sounds like he's going to stay for one more year in Pittsburgh, reuniting with Mike McCarthy. You've got the Bengals, who we've already talked about. The Ravens. Cleveland, I mean, we'll see. They're Cleveland at the end of the day. AFC East, the Patriots just played in the Super Bowl, and they did not look very good doing so. You have the Buffalo Bills, who seem to have a ceiling in the postseason. Miami looks like they're in rebuilding mode. The Jets are going to continue to be in rebuilding mode for Lord knows how long. The AFC is going to be very crowded this year because I think the Bengals, Ravens, and Chiefs are all going to bounce back. The 4 best teams that I think a lot of people felt like have run the AFC, obviously the Chiefs number 1, and in a distant 2, 3, and 4, you have the Bills, Ravens, and the Bengals. And none of those teams reached the Final Four this year. The Chiefs missed the playoffs, Bengals missed the playoffs, Ravens missed the playoffs, Bills, they were eliminated in the divisional round against Denver. Look, New England didn't look great. And I think that's a team that's still learning and still growing. I think New England will still be competitive. Would I bet on New England to go back to the Super Bowl? Right now, no. I don't know who I would bet right now. I wouldn't pick the Chiefs. As much as I want to say Buffalo, I think we've just seen time and time again. Even people say Bills fans love to make this excuse that Allen does not have any help whatsoever and that he's carrying the whole team. That's not true. He's had a top 10 defense for some seasons, and he just had the league leading rusher in James Cook. And by the way, the 2 best single season receiving performances in Bills history both came from Stephon Diggs with Josh Allen. So it's not like he hasn't had help. He's had help, and they just haven't been able to get through. They just haven't. I don't know who would represent the AFC in the Super Bowl next year. No one knows, which is more than a year away. Next year's Super Bowl, that is. But if you're the Chiefs and you saw that, Buffalo once again hit a wall. New England looked like they might not be as hot as some people thought. Now let's look at the AFC West. The Chargers, they had a bad year with offensive line injuries. You can't bank on that to happen every single time. If they're healthy, they could be a good football team. But if they have offensive line issues again with players staying healthy, that does open the door quite a bit. Here's the thing with Denver, because I thought Bo Nix was really good his rookie season. He took a big step back. And yes, he helped the Broncos put up 33 against the Bills. But there were also a lot of games this year where a lot of people in Denver were concerned for that offense. I know the one game that really sticks out was the Thursday night football game against the Raiders when the Broncos won 10-7. They made that far more interesting than it needed to be. Against the Chiefs, when the Chiefs had their practice squad players, they won that game 20-13. Against Houston, a very good defense, won that game 18-15. They had their backs up against the wall multiple times against the Giants. There was another come from behind win. I think it was Philadelphia. So the Broncos had a really weird season where their offense was not very consistent, but they'd rally in some of these fourth quarters against Philly, against the Giants, against the Texans. I look at the Jets game. They won that one 13-11. They beat Tennessee 20-12. In the postseason, I mentioned they put up 33 on Buffalo, but they only put up 7 against the Patriots. Now, yeah, bad weather conditions, and yes, you can't completely ignore Jarrett Stidham being the starting quarterback. But going into that game, I mentioned that, first of all, New England's defense is for real, and we saw it last night, I felt like. And number 2, even if Bo Nix played in that game, yes, he was coming off maybe his best game of the season, but Bo Nix had been up and down for a lot of the regular season. So I'm not, just because he put up 33 on Buffalo, I don't think he was going to have another great game if the weather was clear and all of that. I can't. And by the way, listen, if you're Denver, you can't be complaining about the weather. You're an outdoor team. You're Denver, for crying out loud. I remember Buffalo was doing this several years back when they lost to Cincinnati in the playoffs, and all the excuses about the weather came up. But suddenly, Josh Allen, he's a legend in the snow, except when he plays against a top tier team. May wasn't a legitimate MVP candidate. I mean, if you're going to base it off last night, sure, but keep one thing in mind. I think people forget this. Those regular season awards, and yes, they are regular season awards, they're based on the regular season. They're not based on what you did in the playoffs. Now, I've heard some people on sports talk radio say, from an optics perspective, it would have looked bad if Drake May won MVP and looked like that 3 or 4 days later. Not really. If you understand how the awards work, those awards are all based on the regular season. Mike Vrabel won Coach of the Year because of what he did in the regular season. Some of you guys know this, but some of you guys don't. And Jason, you're right. Yeah, that was the score of that game. A lot of people don't realize this. The voters, whenever they vote for All-Pro, MVP, Offensive Defensive Player of the Year, Offensive Defensive Rookie of the Year, Comeback Coach, all that stuff, they do it the Monday immediately after the regular season. That's why a lot of media outlets like Fox Sports, CBS, and everywhere else, and any other content creator like me, when they put out their awards, you'll always see it the week after the regular season. You'll never see it right before the Super Bowl. I mean, if we were going to witness these awards and the votes were going to get submitted after the conference championship games, well, I mean, Sam Darnold would have been your MVP. Okay. Vrabel would have still won Coach of the Year, but the awards would look way different if they were based on postseason performance. That's why you have a Super Bowl MVP. Lori, I agree. I would have liked to see Myers. I would have liked to see him receive that MVP award. I think he should have gotten it, but what are you going to do? Denver is going to be the team. Sean is a great coach. He will be ready. I mean, listen, I think so too. I think that Denver defense is for real. They've led the league in sacks 2 years in a row now. Now, when it's time to pay Bo Nix, and that's coming up real soon, kind of like what I was saying earlier about Drake May, they're not going to be able to afford some of those guys on defense. So we'll see how that team looks long run. But short term, yeah, spend all the money you can, because once it's time to pay Bo Nix, you won't be able to spend as much. Boy, Mafe, yeah, that's a really good consideration there. I think he'd do some really good things, but again, the cost. And I can't sit here and say, well, hopefully he accepts a team-friendly deal. No, I mean, these guys all want money. They all want money at the end of the day. Joining us right now on the Chiefs Zone podcast, this man has had a very crazy 24 hours as his name was mentioned in a Super Bowl commercial. The Chiefs were not in it for a 4th straight Super Bowl, but we did get a mention by this gentleman, member of the 1980s All-Decade Team and Chiefs Hall of Fame, and now a guy who's been mentioned in a Super Bowl commercial. Very generous to give us a few minutes of his time. Chiefs Hall of Famer Duron Cherry. Duron, thank you so much for joining us here on the Chiefs Zone podcast. How are you, sir?
Farzine, I'm doing great, man. How are you?
I'm good. Listen, I put together a list of 10 people who had a better night than the New England Patriots. You ranked number 3 on that list. You had a pretty
Okay.
good night.
Yeah, it's a good night. Get a mention. My phone started blowing up right after, that aired in the second quarter. My brother was actually the first person that called me from New Jersey, but I couldn't answer the phone because my daughter had my phone most of the day and my battery was pretty much out. So I couldn't answer his call. And then I called him back and he goes, "Man, I'm sitting here watching the game and all of a sudden your name pops up." So the questions started coming. Did you know about it? What's going on? What's going on? I said, yeah, I know about it. They gave me a heads up, but it was nice.
Really? So who gave you the heads up?
So they had sent me out. There was a gentleman that called me and said, "Hey, would you be willing to lend your name to this Uber Eats spot? We're not sure, your name will get in there at all, but would you be willing to do that?" And I said, "Sure." He says, it's with Bradley Cooper and Matthew McConaughey, and they're talking about food, and your name came up because of cherry being a food. Your name came up, and so we're thinking about using it in a commercial, so for the Super Bowl. So that was I'm like, oh, okay, that's interesting. Not knowing if I'd make the final cut, and then sure enough, we made the final cut.
So what was were you actually watching it when it happened, or were you away from the TV? Where were you when this happened?
Oh, I was sitting there right there on my couch outside watching it on the TV with my wife and my daughters, and we're sitting there and they're going crazy, they hear my name like, was that your name that they just called? And even and then my son texts me and he's going crazy. He goes, "Dad, my phone's blowing up, people are calling me asking me, did you know? Did you know?" And I didn't tell them because I didn't know if they were, from that standpoint, whether, I keep everybody, just let them hear it if they hear it and then get the response after that.
Yeah, so I'll be honest. I was looking at my phone when that was happening. I heard you. I thought I heard your name twice, but the previous name they mentioned was Gerard Cherry. So
Yeah,
if you're not paying
Gerard
it,
Cherry.
yeah, if you're not paying attention, it can sound like they said your name twice.
Yes.
So I
Yes.
look up and I see him holding a cherry. So I thought that was really interesting. Yeah,
Yeah.
I've always wanted to ask you this, but do you like cherries? Is that even a
I
thing?
do. I
Okay.
do. Yeah, actually, the crazy thing is, when I was younger, the house we lived in that we grew up in, we had a big cherry tree in our backyard. So we
Okay.
used to climb out my brother's bedroom and go on the walk on the roof, and we just go pick cherries off the tree. So yeah, we had a cherry tree growing up.
We have these really good safeties with fruit names: Duran Cherry, Eric Berry. On the
Yeah.
other side, Rashi Rice. Like, I mean, I'm trying. I'm sure there's another Chiefs player I'm forgetting, but I've always wanted to ask you that. I guess that was the best time to ask you about that. You said your daughter had your phone when that commercial was happening. Was she wondering why a bunch of people were calling and texting you in that moment?
Well, here's the way it went. So my daughter had my phone, and then I had to go in because my battery was about to die, literally about to die. So I plugged it in inside, and we have these sliding glass doors that open up, and we have this enclosed porch. So it was such a beautiful day. We were outside watching the game, and all of a sudden, when that commercial came on, my wife's phone literally started blowing up. She was getting, I mean, there were so many people calling her, sending messages to her. She goes, "Duran, my phone's blowing up. I think people saw your spot." And she goes, "If my phone's blown up, then yours has got to be blowing up." And sure enough, I started getting calls from, I mean, they were coming in from everywhere, all over the country, actually. Um, and it was nice. And then I had to respond to everybody and let them know, yeah, I did know about it. And, well, why didn't you tell me? I said, you just never know if you're going to be in those things. So, whatever.
That's awesome. Well, hey, I'm happy for you. You certainly deserve that, and Who knows? Maybe it happens again. Maybe they do another Uber Eats commercial, and hopefully they'll include you next time in it. Duran, before we get out of here, I do want to give you the opportunity. I know you've got a lot of events coming up. I know near next September, the end of next September, you will have your auction event as well as your 2-day golf outing. You guys do have an event that's coming up much sooner. It's going to be your casino night on May the 2nd at Ameristar Casino. Talk about that. What can people expect, and what can people do in terms of purchasing a ticket or attending that event?
Yeah, this is great. We went over and met with the folks at Ameristar, and they just been absolutely, absolutely incredible with some of the things that we're able or working on doing with them. So they're going to provide us with some space, and we're going to do a casino night as a fundraiser out at Ameristar. So we're really looking forward to that. That's going to be on May the 2nd. You can contact the foundation through Duran Cherry Foundation.org and get information on the casino night. It's going to be great. It's going to be nice, and looking forward to finding another way for us to be able to raise funds, Farzine, to be able to help our community. That's what it's all about, pure and simple. We want to do as much as we can possibly to fulfill some needs that we have in our communities through, charitable organizations that need help. So we're really excited about this opportunity to grow and expand, how we're able to bring more additional resources into the foundation. So in turn, we can give those resources to charitable organizations in Kansas City that need it the most.
Yeah, and I know you guys do a lot of great things with your foundation, and your executive director, Aaron, all your volunteers, they do a lot of great stuff. And if people want more information on that, it is DuranCherryFoundation.org. Duran, I know you've also got a really big event that's coming up next month that you can't necessarily share the details on, but we'll definitely have you back on to help promote that.
Yes.
I appreciate everything you do, and I do appreciate you giving up a few minutes of your time. Happy for you. Out of all the things on your resume, all decades team, 4 interceptions in 1 game, Chiefs Hall of Famer, this is now, it's got to be high up there. A mention in a Super Bowl commercial. I'm happy for you. I appreciate your time, and we'll have you back on soon.
Okay, Farzine, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
All right. Take care, Ron. Thank you.
All right.
All right. Our big thanks to Duran Cherry joining us here on the Chief Zone podcast here, talking about his interesting night with the Super Bowl getting mentioned during the Uber Eats commercial. So like I told him, happy for him. He deserved that moment. He never got the chance of playing the Super Bowl. So he got a Super Bowl shine. He deserved that. Absolutely deserved that. A couple of quick things, just to read a couple of comments here before we get out of here. Lewis says, you know what I've seen in yesterday's game that I haven't seen in the last 3 years in KC? Outstanding play on special teams. I asked this question again. When was the last time the Chiefs had a kickoff or a punt return? I assume you mean a kickoff or a punt return for a touchdown. I remember looking this up recently, and I thought to myself, it would have been 2019 when McCole Hardman had a kick return touchdown against the Chargers in week 17, when they also needed the Dolphins to lose so the Chiefs could get the 2 seed. But there was actually one more recent, and I, for the life of me, don't recall it. It was a return touchdown. Oh, no, it was not 2021. It was 2020. Let me look this up. Bear with me here. It's been a while. And yes, special teams does need to improve. Absolutely. Byron Pringle had a kick return touchdown. Hold on. When was Byron Pringle? I don't recall this. Byron Pringle kick return touchdown. I got to turn down the volume here because we can't. So it was in week 7 against Denver in 2020. Dude, 2020, man. Like, who remembers 2020? Okay. I remember the Chiefs won 15 games that year. Okay, there's snow on the ground, limited capacity in the stands. He's a couple yards deep into the end zone. 102 yards, made a couple defenders miss, and then goes diagonally for a little bit. And the only guy close to him is Marcus Kemp. I was about to ask who number 19 is. I knew it wasn't Kadarius Toney at the time. I'm watching this highlight right now. I do not remember this kick return touchdown. I don't. But to answer your question, that's the last time the Chiefs had a kick return touchdown. And special teams has kind of been an issue. I will say this. I thought Matt Araiza definitely improved last year, especially with his directional punting. Araiza was a far better punter this past year than the year before, which that was more so his rookie season. So I like seeing that from Araiza. Winchester, great long snapper. But man, special teams, the return game was bad. You didn't have a lot of help with the blocking either. There was always a holding penalty. Not always hurt your return game. Harrison Butker, he had kind of an up and down game, but he had he played much better in the second half. He had that game against Indianapolis where I think he made 5 field goals, including a game-winning field goal in overtime. And then he had that game against the Raiders, which, there wasn't really much to brag about in that game for either team because neither team scored a touchdown. It was just 4 field goals on both sides, or was it 3 field goals plus a safety? That's what that game was about. But Harrison Butker came through with every single kick in that one. So, and by the way, Matt Araiza and James Winchester, I know we didn't spend any time on special teams today, but Winchester and Araiza are both free agents. Joshua says Duran should be in the Hall of Fame. Yeah, I agree. And listen, we had this discussion recently. And we've had this discussion with Duran as well as Neil Smith, and I brought this up last week when talking about the Hall of Fame voting and how that really has gone lately. I don't think Duran and Neil Smith, Jim Tyrer, I don't think those guys are ever going to get in. They should be in. But we're kind of getting to a point now where recency bias always wins, and we're all guilty of it, me included. But, guys who played in the 70s, the 80s, even the 90s, and some from the 2000s, man, I think those guys are starting to become more and more forgotten about. Because let's be honest, unless the Hall of Fame voters, unless they're petty, again, they should be voting Gronk in. Unless they want to hold Deflategate against him just because, guilty by association. Roethlisberger and Peterson are also eligible. Yeah, I know they had a couple of bad off the field incidents, but they should be first ballot Hall of Famers. So you already have 3 spots that are occupied that should be occupied. I think Eli Manning I know Eli Manning, that's a big debate. He, I think, should be in. He's had to wait a couple of years. It's not easy to get guys. There are a lot of, every time when you look at the finalists, the 15 or so finalists every year for the Pro Football Hall of Fame, all of them are eligible. Not only are they eligible, they're worthy of it, but not all 15 can get in. So I'd like to see that format change. Last year, only 4 people got into the Hall of Fame. That is way too little. That is way too small of a number. I mean, listen, these guys want to get in while they're alive. They just do. Listen, they're up there in age. They deserve to have their moment. Sure, it's nice when their families are there and everything to accept it in their honor, but they should always be the players. Doesn't always work out that way, I guess. I've been a big proponent of Duran being in the Hall of Fame, even way before we had our great professional relationship with Duran Cherry. But hopefully, bad year, COVID year. If you're a Chiefs fan, you at least had something to look forward to in 2020 because they won a lot of football games that year, 15 if I remember. Getting to a point now where nobody voting watch those guys play. I disagree, Joshua. I mean, listen, you have and I apologize, I don't remember his name. The Steelers fan from the Pat McAfee show. I don't know how old that guy is. He doesn't look like he's much older than me. Like, I think that guy grew up on Power Rangers and Pokemon like I did. Like, there's no way this guy really knows about legends from the 80s. Does he? Like, I'm not going to sit here and pretend like I do. Come on. You still have a lot of people who are voters who've been around the game a long time. I mean, listen, I heard Randy Moss the other day say that the only people who should vote are players and coaches. Man, I've seen some players and coaches give out their top 5. Have you heard Dan Orlovsky's analysis? That guy played the game. Have you heard Rex Ryan's analysis? It's not good. It's not good at all. I mean, there are a lot of former players who are analysts. They're not very good at it. So why would I trust them with a Hall of Fame vote? A lot of them are just going to vote. First of all, any vote that they can give, they'll prioritize it to guys that they know or that they're associated with the same team. I mean, generally, a lot of these alums from the same team are very well connected, so they'll be biased in that manner. And by the way, props to Rodney Harrison during yesterday's pregame on NBC. He looked at Tony Dungy straight in the eyes and talked about how it was ludicrous that Belichick didn't get in. And he looked at him and said, "You guys got it wrong." Oh, that was good. I love that call out. Absolutely love that. Listen, the idea that just because you never played the game doesn't mean you can't talk about it or cover it or vote, I disagree. I think there are great journalists out there who know the game well and can talk about it and vote objectively. Some do, some don't. Vahe Gregorian, I can understand his perspective. Listen, I'm all for the senior nominees. Like, those guys seriously might not get another chance. It's difficult for a senior nominee to become a finalist again. It really is. But you can't put Belichick on the shelf. You just can't. And listen, for people who are like, oh, the Deflategate and Spygate. Okay, so you held him out for 1 year. He's not a first ballot Hall of Famer, but he's going to get, like, what are we doing? He's getting in. We know he's getting in. So what was ultimately accomplished? Are you going to not let Roethlisberger be a first ballot Hall of Famer because of his off the field accusations? Because if you're going to tell me cheating and behavior, that stuff, Brett Favre was involved in a very serious scandal where he was sending sexually explicit images to a Jets reporter. He was a first ballot Hall of Famer. Terrell Owens was not a first ballot. He had to wait a couple of years, in fact, to get into the Hall of Fame because of his behavior, which is ridiculous. This isn't the Character Hall of Fame. This is the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Now, listen, O.J. Simpson got inducted after whatever. If all of that occurred before his Hall of Fame election, would the Hall of Fame put him in? I don't know. I mean, there's this exact same debate right now with Jim Tyrer and the fact that Bill Polian has been very vocal against Jim Tyrer when it shouldn't be about what he did. Yes, what he did was awful, tragic, and bad. And we had a great conversation with Kevin Patrick Allen, who's doing a documentary on Jim Tyrer. And he's been very well connected with Jim Tyrer's family. And listen, I don't think they're going to hide from the fact that what he did was awful. I mean, some of those kids were in the home when that all happened. So they're not going to shy away from that. But he should be in the Hall of Fame. Ed Buddy should be in the Hall of Fame. But sadly, Ed Buddy is long forgotten about. And I'm not trying to be disrespectful when I say that. Kind of to what you were saying, Joshua. Yeah, I guess, you have guys who are voting. They're not all young guys in their 30s. But I guess some of them just maybe don't remember the guys from the 60s and the 70s that have been passed up on for so many years. So I don't know. Yeah, Eric, that's a good point with Ray Lewis. Yeah. I don't know, man. There's a lot they need to figure out with the Hall of Fame voting and the process and how many guys can get in. I'm not saying make this a participation award and let everyone in. No, I think you've got to be great in order to be allowed into the Pro Football Hall of Fame, but I think the process needs to be much better. Look, maybe this whole Bill Belichick thing, maybe it's a blessing in disguise, especially with the reasons that Vahe portrayed out there. Maybe that forces the Hall of Fame to change things. One can only hope. All right, I'm going to go ahead and get out of here. That'll do it for this episode of the Chiefs Zone Podcast. My name is Farzin Vasugian. I appreciate you all joining me for this episode of the Chiefs Zone Podcast. If you enjoyed any part of this podcast, please let your friends know. Share this podcast with them. If you missed any part of this live stream, we just had Duron Cherry on. He was great talking about his Super Bowl commercial name drop. So if you missed that, it'll be archived shortly on Facebook, YouTube, X, Spotify, Apple, anywhere where you can download and listen to the Chiefs Zone Podcast. We'll be back Wednesday. There won't be a Red Friday Q&A live chat, so just be aware of that. But I think we're going to go back to just doing Mondays and Wednesdays at 7 p.m. Central Time. We might kind of remove Mondays, just kind of depending on the news cycle, but I would imagine the Chiefs are going to be very busy in the weeks to come. Also, for a lot of you guys who have been asking, we are very close, very, very, very close to finalizing our first ever Chiefs Zone live with a live audience. I want to give details, but I can't do that yet. I'm kind of at a point now where it's not up to me to give out information. I have to wait on the people in charge of this. So it's a very interesting situation to be in. It's almost like free agency. Like you want the secret before it gets out there, but I can't do that. So for those of you who've been asking, yes, we basically have verbally agreed on a date, a time, and a location. All I can tell you is late March is our target date, and we're hoping we can follow through with that. Once you guys see the details, I think you guys will be shocked as to the venue and who we're doing it with. I'm actually very excited to share that information with you, but I cannot give that information out right now. But I am hoping very, very, very soon. That's all I can say. So stay tuned for that. I'm Farzin Vasugian. Thank you all for joining me. Big thanks to Duron Cherry once again for being our guest tonight. I will talk to you all later. Peace out.